I've always made things since I was very young, and clothes especially became a real focus for me because we didn't have a lot when we were growing up. I've got an identical twin, and the first thing I really remember making is when we were about at 9, I took down our bedroom curtains and I sewed them into, it was a Ming the Merciless style gown for her birthday, and she had actually also made me a skirt, and they were both totally unwearable, but it was very much the beginning of this kind of relationship with taking stuff apart and remaking it, which I kind of kept through my whole life, I think. So I'd always made things, but I was quite sensible, and when I really wanted to do art, I knew it was probably not the best way to buy a house. So when I did, I say history, I went and did history and cultural studies and things, but knew I needed kind of an art, to keep an art focus. So my first job was in as an assistant curator at an arts and crafts museum, and really learnt about kind of natural dyes and weaving, and kind of just really loved being involved and absorbed in that world. But struggled to stay there because you don't get paid a lot as a assistant curator, so I ended up working in sustainable transport and managing sustainability projects. And actually I think my creativity then started to really kind of become part of that kind of sustainability narrative, and it was.
And project management skills are useful too, aren't they?
Project management skills are really useful. I'm quite organised, but I need to have everything colour ordered. Anyway, so that journey's been going on now for 20 years probably, of how you kind of marry those two things together. And then I accidentally kind of fell into crochet design when I had my children. When my youngest, I was at home kind of bored to tears. And it's not a slightly controversial thing to say, I love my children. Tiny children are quite boring. And I started designing stuff for them very quickly. It's like I think within the first week of learning how to crochet, had made my first pattern, because I just couldn't find anything. There wasn't much of a revival at the time, so it was very traditional, and I was kind of making mermaid hair and kind of all sorts of things, and that became a book very quickly. And then actually I think by the time they'd asked me to write a third book, I thought I can't keep doing all the sustainable design, urban design stuff and crochet, so actually landed into crochet world. Instagram sort of happened, and I suddenly realised I had this huge community of people that I was connected with through making, and this kind of real love and sharing of making. And although I never really designed a lot of garments, actually it was more about that kind of, I was doing that at home quietly by myself too, and I kind of wanted to find a way to start bringing that into my community, and how I sort of started to talk about and share that. So I think I hit about 20,000 followers and thought, I need to, what's the point of this if you're not doing something good with it somehow? So I went off and did a master's in sustainable design, and learnt about how I can use my practice and my design process to apply it to all sorts of other things. And actually I thought, okay, I've got this crochet. Instagram is great for a very specific sort of audience, so I've got this crochet audience. How do I start talking to them about sustainability and making, and actually how all the skills that they've got are amazing life skills? It was something that you said in your book, Jane, I found really, I used in my master's, in fact. You were quoted in my master's thesis, because I think those tools are just like cooking and cleaning. They're a way for us to interact with our material world, and our material world is getting bigger and bigger all the time because people keep making stuff. So actually I wanted to find a way to have that conversation of saying, okay, you're comfortable doing crochet, how can we get you thinking actually not just about making stuff there, but you've already got all these clothes that exist in your wardrobe, how can you start to use that skill? So I wanted to, so I designed this collection of stuff that didn't involve any sewing. I wanted to feel really comfortable for people that were comfortable with this skill but maybe not that skill, to say you don't, actually any form of material manipulation will allow you to kind of get to this point. So that's when crochet hacking sort of turned up. And it was sort of named by the community, which was lovely, and it was a way of changing and altering garments by interacting them with crochet. So either making a new front, or my favourite that I've made recently, a pair of baseball boots, like making whole new panels of baseball boots, which I haven't got on today, but I love them. All sorts of things, and actually that kind of was a really gorgeous thing, and by being able to introduce this notion of kind of remaking clothes with crochet, it then opened up to a wider conversation about actually other ways we can kind of interact with the clothes we've already got and all those sorts of things. So that's kind of where my practice, I feel practice is a rather pretentious word for just cutting and
I think
sticking.
it applies.
Cutting and sticking is what it feels like. So while all that's going on, I kind of also, because Instagram kind of blossomed, and because it's around clothes, I actually ended up teaching here at University of Brighton in the fashion communication department. And my specialism is social media, as you would imagine. But what's really fabulous about it is we're really supported to kind of push that in as positive a way and a innovative way as we can. So actually I talk a lot about activism. I use a lot of the work of Osvaldo de Castro, and the whole fashion revolution is an amazing example of how you create a campaign and community, you know, but we're not, and it's marketing, but we're marketing ideologies around remaking. We're not marketing buy more stuff. So, you know, we've been really try to use activism as much as possible in my conversations with students. And for me, I don't feel like we're teaching fashion. What we're really talking about is how you style something. So we make them, they're not allowed to buy any new clothes. Everything that they use, so they have to do full photo shoots, they have to make full magazines, like between them, the proper 80-page, everything has to be second-hand sourced or borrowed. Nothing is allowed to be bought new. And I teach specific sort of sessions in upcycling, like how to teach them basic sewing and encourage them to start cutting into stuff so they can style their own garments for shoots, so it becomes more editorial. And actually what's amazing is you just see them kind of having these like epiphany moments of, oh, I don't have to, you know. They're so
that's exciting, isn't it?
It's really exciting. You know, they're so used to ASOS and Shein and, you know, buying stuff for nothing and getting rid of it, that actually to then go, no, you're not allowed to do that. They're all like, ah. But, you know, then they have to get really conceptual and engaged with the garments themselves to go, okay, we did this whole workshop with them where I bring in mental clothes and I mix them all up and they get 3 garments from it, and they have to go and start a shoot based on those 3 things, and they're like that, whoa. But actually the stuff that comes out of that is so cool because they're these amazing young exciting minds. So I always think teaching isn't, I'm not just telling them things, I get so much from working with them. It's like this constant collaboration, and it's totally inspired and influenced how I make and what I'm making. You know, it's a total exchange all of the time. So
it must be really empowering for them to see this other way that, you know, is really kind of alternative thinking.
You have real moments. So some of them come and sorry, we're just by the police station. It's very helpful. Some of them come already quite kind of informed and really passionate and already quite angry actually about the fashion industry and kind of want to subvert it already. And then others come because they like the kind of glamour of it and the kind of want to be in editors at Vogue or whatever, and actually kind of helping them on a journey where they really have to explore not just how to make things look pretty, but what it means and actually the impact that they have in the world. It kind of gives them a sense of agency of, you're not just making something beautiful, you are absolutely influencing how all of us think about ourselves and the world and our interactions with it, which is, you know, I'm a massive fan of. It's about, you know, we know that the world is screwed. We've already had that information for years. What we've struggled with is talking about it in a way that people care about. You know, we don't, or we can't, or we get overwhelmed and we go and watch Netflix series because it's just easier. And actually I think what we teach is essentially visual communication. We teach how can you start to, and that's what my Instagram's been about for ages now, is how can I have a conversation in a way that you will care about, that doesn't make you feel overwhelmed and upset or scared. It gives you a sense of agency and actually empowers you to do something. So by sharing my skills in the way that I do, it's just, I genuinely just go, you know, have this, it's fine, like all of us need to know how to do this. And it's just exactly the same with what we do with our students, of going, you are actually the voice. You are the people that are developing the photography and illustrative and graphic design skills that can actually start to kind of change the messages that we have. So
it's awesome, Emma. Thank you
so
for your
exciting.
work and your generous sharing as well. That's fabulous. And now tell us about the Net Zero Design project as well that you collaborated on.
So through working at Brighton Uni, I only work here a couple of days technically, but there's loads of opportunities to get involved in research projects from the Design Museum, and this company called AHRC put out they were looking for people to do a research project into how can we use design to start to explore net zero plus for businesses. And net zero plus is, so net zero is to be carbon neutral. Net zero plus is not just the kind of carbon counting element of that, but actually about the community engagement and the communication strategies that surround that, and all the other kind of maybe slightly more ephemeral things. So we were paired with a business in Brighton who are called Posh Totty, and they're a jewellery company. And because I'm a maker, and what they were struggling with really understanding what net zero means. They wanted to be doing good but didn't know how to do it. So I really believe in making that intangible tangible, and I do that through making. So I made a set of charm bracelets for them that they could kind of interact with, and each charm represented a different facet of what it is to be net zero. So one of them was about energy efficiency, one of them was about general housekeeping, one was about circular economy, but another was about influence. And actually within each of these charms there was how, almost like a checklist of things you can be doing as a business, and it really helped them to start to think about what they could do. It made it tangible, which is what we were hoping for. And then through that we did loads of workshops and lots of talking and using their own design language, which was really important as well, so that they felt like they could be fluent in it more. We were able to kind of come to this point with them where they started to realise they weren't just making a product, that actually they could be a service. So the jewellery that they're selling, it's not just I make a thing and you buy it. It was going, okay, we're going to set it up so that you can bring it back, you can have it altered, it can actually, if we make it so that you feel like you can pass it on to someone else, like what are the other things we can do? Everything comes with a cleaning cloth now, so that's part of this sort of conversation. So it really changed how they saw themselves and what they thought they could do. And what's really exciting about that, I mean, it was really exciting because we all kind of came to it as a bit of an epiphany moment. So I say we, I've got an amazing supervisor called Nick Gant, who's like a bit of an expert in these things, but none of us had really imagined what was going to come of the project. It was very much kind of feeling the way with them and seeing what they thought they needed, and then kind of adapting and co-designing with them an outcome and mapping things for them to see how it would work. And actually to kind of, for all of us to get to this point of realisation where actually you could shift what you do from not just being someone that sells a thing to somebody that has a continual relationship with you after you've bought a thing, was a real kind of, oh, it's really exciting moment. So we've just kind of submitted our report back to the Design Museum, and I think it's going to be in an exhibition.
That's exciting development.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And I guess for clothing businesses or fashion businesses, they could adopt this, and some already are probably taking this route a little, where more engagement and more of a sense of longevity about items.
I think so. So I think I was saying, because of where we live, there's a culture of an aspirational culture around how we treat clothes and things, and that's because I live somewhere that's quite privileged. A lot of white middle class people that have got kind of London salaries and are down by the sea, and they've got kind of the time and energy to be able to think about where their stuff comes from. But it means we've got lots of kind of alteration shops already existing in Brighton, so you can take something and have it shaped to fit you better. Or what is really interesting to me, and actually this is a bit of a feminist standpoint, when you think about how clothes were developed for mass marketing, men's suits were and still are made with adjustments in the waistbands and things. You can still get them reshaped. Women's clothes were made in 4 standard sizes, and the premise was women know how to sew, they can change it to fit them. So what you get is this horrific standardising of the female form. I'm a size 12 and I'm 5'10". My mother-in-law is a size 12 and she's 4'9". We are supposed to both go and buy the same thing off the peg. There's this kind of real, so it does one thing in terms of the human body, but two, actually, and those garments were never made to be altered in the same way that men's clothes are. And that kind of domestic craft, it's called, or hobby craft as it's now seen, is seen it's seen as this kind of leisure pursuit of middle class women. So it's already kind of denigrated in that way. But it's also a skill set that, as women kind of fought for a right to go into the workplace, women went one way into the workplace, but no men came back the other way to take over those domestic kind of skills. And I'm not just talking about like cooking and cleaning, but it really is about those kind of fundamental, how do we interact with the things we've got around us. So actually it's quite a feminist issue, this kind of issue around how we can relate to our garments now and how we can keep them going longer. And there's also, with women going into the workplace, that desire to go, they don't want to be associated with their mum or their nan who was sort of sat knitting, and because it was seen as demeaning, and it still is seen as demeaning. These skill sets are sort of, they're not held in high craft. If someone showed you a beautifully made chair and you go, oh, the workmanship on that, look how it's turned, isn't that beautiful? But if someone showed you a jumper, a knitted jumper, we don't have the same conversations about those two objects. They don't hold the same cultural value.
Yeah.
Whereas to get to a knitted jumper,
It's the patriarchy at work again, is it not?
And I don't want to be that person, because I know that shuts so many people down as soon as you start going, smash the patriarchy. But the more, so I'm doing a PhD around this at the moment, the more you look into it, the more you realise it's this huge systemic problem that comes from this, we call it the dead white man problem, don't we? And actually sustainability really does come back to these kind of modes of thinking.
Because it's about control and domination, isn't it? And thinking that, we can do this,
Absolutely.
We can keep doing it. We can keep doing it.
But craft for me is such a space of, and it actually has always been associated with female agency. One, to how we make our clothes. It's why clothes are so important for women, because they give you a sense of, when you weren't allowed to even go out on your own, you had to have a chaperone, you can at least control what you look like, that sense of control of what we look like. I think it's also why fashion, when I tell people I teach fashion communication, they're like, oh. And you're so justified, actually I promise I'm doing it. We talk about activism and all these things. It's never going to be a highbrow subject because it's still seen as
But it is an everyday thing, and it's so important. And a huge footprint comes from satisfaction or dissatisfaction with what we're wearing.
It's the third biggest carbon footprint on the planet. It's horrific. The amount of clothes that are made every day to satiate this kind of need to remake who we are all the time. And it came from, so women suddenly had spending money, 80s and 90s, where you didn't have your own money to go and buy stuff. So it's why when you go to charity shops or anywhere, it's all women's clothes. There wasn't a sudden boom in men's clothes, like they needed to own more garments. Actually, it's all, I need another new top, I need another new pair of trousers, I've got more shoes than I will ever wear. Because I feel they make it's all about styling, they make the outfit. Because we're still working on this model of that's how you have your agency in the world, is you can control what you look like. And it's now become insidious and turned into change your face and change your body and all sorts of other things. That's another conversation. But clothes have got this real kind of significance.
And when you've got a few skills to be hands-on, it does change the game a bit, doesn't it?
Massively. One of the issues I think people find is it's not until you get to I interact with a lot of clothes. I made this one out of a scarf, which I might have on inside out. It doesn't really matter. But you have to, I make things badly because I'm not very patient with my own stuff. I tend to kind of whiz it through and then it starts fraying and the seams come apart and I can't really wear it and it's a bit crooked. And I think a lot of people find that when they want to sit down to make something, if it's not perfect when it's finished, how are you going to wear it? So
it takes a bit of confidence, doesn't it?
It takes confidence and it takes practice. And actually you've got to have that time to dedicate to being able to do those things. I mean, one of the reasons I love knitting, but I hate knitting is because when you get to the end and you've made something you can't wear because it's the wrong size, which you won't know until you've finished, it's heartbreaking because of that time and effort and energy. So there's sort of that downside to it, which is why I guess we relate it to those women who've got time to just enjoy the process now. But actually we also, mending's become such a, I'm going to say it's slightly fetishized now. We're in this world where to be able to darn your own garments has become quite an aspirational thing. But it takes time.
It's a privilege to mend, actually, and to wear visibly mended garments. This is what I'm coming to realise from speaking to others about it.
Massively. And I work somewhere where I work in an art school. I mean, you can turn up with a flower pot on your head. But it's totally acceptable. Whereas where I actually live is a slightly kind of down at heel, quite a lot of poor communities. We've got big council estates and things there. And actually the aspiration is to want things that look new because it's how you start to kind of, you're trying to place yourself in the world, aren't you? And it, you know, again, we think clothes have been, you almost don't see them because they're everywhere all of the time, but they're such a fundamental part of how we exchange about who we are in the world and all those sorts of things. They're really integral to that. And I always try and wear something I've made because one, I'm trying to help change the conversation to go, this is normal. But you know, I would be kidding myself if when I go and pick my child up from school in the playground, I'm not the one that looks a little bit extraordinary compared to everybody else. You know, it's not a normalised thing, and because they know I'm creative, that's okay. You know, again, it's part of the narrative of what I put into the world and what's okay for me to do, as opposed to my husband who works in an office. You know, he can't swan in. I say that he's got pink trainers, which he loves, but you know, it's important, and it needs to change on a much wider level.
How's that change going to happen, do you think, Emma?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, so working with the students that I work with, you can only hope that actually they take what we learn together, because as you're teaching these things, they change all the time. You know, the world is changing. I was 2 years ago teaching trend forecasting. Now I feel so inappropriate to talk about trend. I have to, you know, actually, that's not okay to think about these things as these fast-moving things. Actually, we need to think about different ways of changing the language around that and what it means and how we move those things forward. So as we learn together, what I really hope is they go into the world and they take it with them and want to change it for their generation. But I also think that we need to continue educating. This is new for everybody. You know,
and we're at a seminal moment, you know, pivotal moment, aren't we?
Absolutely. So to expect anyone to know what to do when it is that big and overwhelming is too much. So I think we do need to, we've got these amazing platforms for connection. For me, social media world is an amazing space to sort of talk, and it's the chap called Alex Garner who in a book called The Myth Gaps talks about them as our new churches. There are spaces where we go to exchange ideas, and I think it's taking responsibility when you're on those platforms to have the right sorts of conversations, but also not in a damning way, in a supportive. I just think if we can all come at this as going, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know how to do this and I don't know how to make it better, but I'm going to keep trying. And if we can all be sharing as we're trying, then I think rather than trying to find those solutions, actually what we'll come to is a kind of collective, that's very idealistic, isn't it? A beautiful collective utopia where we all go, oh yes, of course I'm going to hand stitch my trousers. It's not going to be for everyone. I think that's fine. I've got a specific community of people where we all love doing that thing. I hate cooking. I hate cooking. I find it a chore that I have to do every day, and it's just fuel. Other people are amazing at it and will happily spend all day and every day doing that. I think if we can kind of go, okay, you do that over there and I'll do this over here, and we all work in our own spaces to kind of come to the best that we can come to, and be as free with sharing that with each other as possible. And I think that's this authentic self thing, isn't it? It's having the confidence to say, this is just how I do it and this is who I am, and I will take the criticism for it, or but I'll just keep working, having a go and share. That's all my Instagram is, and all the book I've written a bunch of books about zero waste craft, and it's just experiments with materials. I think it's getting the confidence to know you can cut into a t-shirt and the world's not going to end. You know, we don't have that kind of relationship with our garments that we used to have. If you're going to get rid of it to a charity shop, or you know, only 80% of that stuff goes to landfill anyway, you might as well see what you can do with it first. And if that's, I'm just going to have to see what happens if I tie-dye with bleach, what's going to happen if I just cut this sleeve off here because I actually don't like the shape of it, or even if you don't want to sew and you just put some safety pins in to gather something, you start to learn a bit about what that material does. And I'm now, 20 years in, and I've just got a lot of knowledge of what different sorts of materials do, but it's all through trial and error, and I think just sharing that trial and error is a really big part of that.
Yeah, and does it make you feel good to be able to have some kind of control over what you're wearing or what's available to you?
Of course, I think, and again, this is a slightly feminist issue, is that sense of agency. Women have used craft as a way to create feel their own sense of agency in the world for quite a long time, and whether it's through garments or making banners for like jam festivals or whatever it is, or knitting for refugees, which we did a lot of when we had lots of refugees from from Syrian refugees in Paris, or sewing scrubs or face masks, or there are ways to go, I have this, I can help, and actually but not just help other people, I'm also helping myself feel like I can do something about this.
And there's the doing, and then there's the actual process of it. Is that, can you talk about the well-being of the almost in the doing?
So I mean, process is such an integral part of, I'm an introvert, I'm really gregarious, and I love people, but I'm not very good at them often, or I try really hard to be good at them, but it means I need quite a lot of respite time afterwards, which I'm sure lots of people will connect with. Making for me is absolutely, it helps me process things, it helps me settle, it helps me find my feet. It's a very grounding activity for me. So there's making for kind of experimentation and fun and exploration, but quite often I can knit something that I will just take apart, because what I needed to do was the knitting, not have the finished thing. So I've got certain wool that knits up and down more easily. And actually I use it quite a lot when I have to go and meet people I don't know. I will knit when we're chatting, because it just takes that pressure off, and I've got a kind of, I don't know how else to describe it. I've talked a little bit, I don't want to sound woo-woo, it's almost like a spiritual thing of going, this is my kind of rest place, and this is my peaceful space, and this is something that allows me to connect not just with my hands and my body, but actually to all the people that have ever done it before. And it's kind of got this weird ancestral link. In the UK we don't have ancestral links, we've had a history of being smashed apart by invaders for thousands of years, and then you've got the Industrial Revolution, so what are you going to do with that? But actually it's a way of really kind of coming to something that feels very solid and very tangible, but very restful. So
it sounds like it's almost a mental health therapy, in a way.
Hugely. So we did, when Instagram, the joyful Instagram at the beginning, when it was about community, there was an amazing woman called Mandy who set up a site called Crafters Therapy, and I very quickly came on board as one of the moderators for that, and it was just sharing the things people were making for their own mental well-being. And we would have people sharing images of stuff they were knitting when they were in hospital, so whether they were caring for someone else, or if they were going through chemo or something, like the things that they would be sat stitching as their way of kind of coping with that. We would also have people sharing things from much more mundane stuff, like, me just getting away from my kids for half an hour. And like when I just need a little bit of time out, or it comes in so many forms. But what was really unifying was that, there are 150,000 of us in the end from all over the world doing all sorts of different crafts. They tend to be quite fabric related. I think there's something soothing maybe about fabric material rather than other materials. They're also quite quiet and calming, that Betsy Greer thing of the quiet activism, actually the slow stitching, or it gives you a sense of peace, I think. And I think it's something about the head and the hands being connected. We don't do a lot of things in our bodies, do we? We're really good at doing stuff online or on computers, but it brings you into your body in a way that nothing else does for me. Or maybe if you like cooking, because you're some sort of cooking freak. I'm sure that's what people get out of that as well. It's that kind of, all of me is doing this, not just one part. It's everything together.
And do you still come across people that aren't very involved with their wardrobes, or?
Yes. Oh my God. I remember, do you know, when I started uni, I thought, this was a long time ago, but I was like, right, I'm going to choose a different style of outfit every day so that no one can pigeonhole me. It was quite pretentious, and I got into this, and I did philosophy and cultural studies for my degree, so there was a lot of kind of cerebral arguments, and one chap was going, I think clothes are totally meaningless, and he was wearing a football shirt at the time. I was like, so if you wore a football shirt from a different team, that would be fine with it? And he was like, no. And I was like, so it does matter. But it was such a beautiful illustration of how whether you think it's important or not, they are carrying your values, and they are carrying your ideals, and everything you wear is sending out some sort of signal. And you might just want to be, I've hit an age where suddenly linen trousers are very appealing. I feel letting go of denim has been one of the hardest things that will ever happen to me, and I'm not even joking, because that, that's a part of a youthful thing. Moving into an elasticated waist, God, still makes me feel sad to my core. But actually, I think especially over lockdown, that desire for kind of comfort and all the other things that come with different materials, suddenly realising why an older lady may want to wear a really elasticated trouser. And I'm having to come to terms with that.
And the pandemic's changed a lot, hasn't it? In what way do you feel has it activated more involvement with our wardrobe and more hands-on?
It's been really interesting because so I did during lockdown, a lot of the big fashion companies like H&M and stuff, they had all this stuff on order from India, and they just were like, nope, I'm not buying it. So actually all of a sudden there was no money going into the factories in India, but they had all these materials that they so I did some work with a company called Lostock, who got directly in contact with the Indian makers, factories, and put together kind of bundles, so you could pay £15 and you get 3 garments directly from this particular factory, and they were all stuff that would have come through, H&M or Marks and Spencer's or wherever, but it was direct from source to try and carry on getting funding down to them. But I think what the pandemic did was really suddenly start to highlight those sorts of systems that we have in place and who's making what and where it's coming from. So that was a big thing for me. But I think I stopped buying clothes. I mean, what was the point? You kind of what I struggle with as a maker in terms of upcycling and remaking, especially with my work, was going, where do I get this stuff? Like, how am I going to start interacting with my wardrobe? And there were sites like Vinted popped up, which is a second-hand clothing app where you could buy second-hand clothes. But what I did was actually ask my local community. I put a message out on Facebook saying, look, if anyone's got any second-hand clothes, I was writing a book at the time and I needed some materials. Let me know and I'll come and pick it up. And I went and picked up 4 people got in touch, and I ended up with something like 10 bin bags full of clothes that they were just chucking out. And at least a third of that was stuff that had never been worn. It was stuff they bought online and couldn't bother to send back, and it was a real kind of revelation in terms of what, you buy stuff because it's satiating something, but actually it's not, doesn't fit you very well, you don't like the material when it's on, and it can't be bothered to send it back, so actually it was just so it was just really fascinating for me over that whole time of really starting to get an understanding into how we are interacting with our clothes and then what happens afterwards. So it's been I think quite transformational. But and I think at the time we felt, oh, this is going to change everything. Actually, people stopped shopping, but it's been so easy to see people slipping straight back into that kind of way of life that I think I want to find a way to try and get us to hold on to it a little bit.
How can we change it to be more positive? What's your latest thinking on that, Emma? I mean, I know we've been talking for half an hour and you've given me some ideas.
I think at the moment, so my research particularly is about how do we carry on empowering people to feel like they can make the time to interact with stuff. So this idea that if we know how to interact with our garments, if we feel confident interacting with our garments, we don't all have to be designers, I don't think, but actually to start to feel like you've got the skills to go, oh, not necessarily, so it's not about mending for me, because I think actually what fashion is about is going, it's that new, who am I going to be this week? It's that kind of identity building. I have a selection of different outfits that I've got Boho Chav, I've got Miss Marple Adventurer, like they've all got these different names because they're all different personas on who I want to be that day. I'm not saying everybody has to do that, that's someone that clearly spends too much time with their clothes, but I think if you can feel like you're confident enough to start interacting with those garments, then you can remake your look and you can get that feeling that you get from buying a new top without having to buy a new top. So you don't have to mend something, but you can transform something. And I think that can be through, oh God, any means. So crochet was obviously one way I was doing it with people. Applique, I'm doing a workshop at a festival soon, and just using fabric to make other patches and, kind of starting to build designs on things, or I think everyone's fairly confident cutting a pair of jeans down to a pair of shorts. It's kind of that notion of,
it's just starting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just starting.
It's baby steps. What can I do? Where do I feel confident? And actually every time you one more cut and you start to feel a bit more confident, and I'm not saying chop up a cashmere jumper. I have done that and I will do it again, I tell you. But actually denim is an amazing material. It's really resilient. You can chop it and it will take ages before it starts to fray for the most part, or actually you can patch it or whatever. but it's finding that starting, that kind of, think of it as like a gateway drug, that gateway drug into starting to interact with the materials in your life, because we've already got enough stuff, like all of us have got enough stuff already. And I might make something and it'll be rubbish, and I think, oh, I'm never going to wear that, but then actually I can just have a go and do it again. Like,
yes, it is keeping going. It's starting and keeping going, isn't it? It's
absolutely.
a journey.
It is. I think that's the point, isn't it? It's a journey. It's like learning how to do anything. You're never going to have to do it straight away. You don't sit down at a piano and go, oh, look at me. It's years. You know, it's not that complicated. That's the joyous thing, though, is it's not that complicated. It's stuff we've been doing for generations. It's not inaccessible.
Do you think people are scared?
Yeah, I do, massively. One of the so I did, when I do workshops with people, one of the ones I was doing with my masters was going, okay, so what do you need to get started doing this? And for people that don't deem themselves creative, because there's this real thing about, am I a creative or am I not? I think everybody, I genuinely think we've all got that capacity, but I think we get sold this idea that you're a creative one and you're not, and it's the ones that you're not. I was doing a research project last summer. They're like, oh no, I don't know how to do it. I can't do that. You know, they weren't good at art at school, so therefore it's not about that for me at all. So I spent some time designing some projects that would get them started with it, that didn't necessarily feel intimidating. They're really simple things. So I made kind of transfers for them to put on tea towels and stuff, really stuff that I was like really basic, but actually, you know, half of them didn't have a pair of scissors at home, because what do you need scissors for? So, you know, it was going, okay, with some basic tools and a changing and thinking about what creative means, we can actually help you start this process. And then actually when you start, it might develop what we actually found was it started to make spaces for creativity with these people that they didn't necessarily see that they had a creative space for. So it was really genuinely really rewarding, this kind of, it's basic manual dexterity, and it's stuff that they liken to being like, oh, when I was a kid I did this. You know, there's a lot of when I was a child, we spend a lot of time making children play with materials and do all this stuff, and then for some reason we go, oh, now you stop. And you go over here and you use a computer, or you know, you have to specialise. But I think what the, you know, for your earlier question, going forward, I think we need to become generalists rather than specialists again. You know, we need to have general skills and lots of different things.
Life skills.
Absolutely, life skills that allow you to feel confident in all these different spaces.